Hey there everyone. Today we're going to be delving into a tool that won't just help you with your projects, but also your personal growth and development. That's right folks, today we're talking about version control software. Now you might be wondering, version control for personal growth, how does that even work? Well, buckle up, because we're about to embark on a journey of self-discovery and improvement like never before. Imagine this, you're on a quest to become the best version of yourself, but sometimes you take a wrong turn, make a mistake along the way. Sound familiar? Well, with version control you can track your personal evolution with precision and clarity. Think of it as your own personal time machine. Every decision, every choice, every version of yourself meticulously documented and preserved for reflection. It's like having a roadmap of your journey towards self-improvement and learning a new skill. And here's where it gets really exciting. With version control softwares like Get and Pitfalls, you can revisit your older versions and learn from them. Maybe you tried a new habit that didn't quite stick, or perhaps you faced a challenge that tested your resilience. Whatever the case may be, you can study your past iterations and gain valuable insight from them. But version control isn't just about looking into the past, it's about moving forward. By analyzing your past revisions, you can identify patterns, set meaningful goals, and chart a course towards the best version of yourself. It's like having a personal coach guiding you every step of the way. Plus, version control fosters accountability and transparency in your personal project. Just like in collaborative projects, every change you make is documented, keeping you honest and accountable to yourself. It's time to own your own story and embrace your growth. And here's the best part, mastering version control isn't just about improving yourself, it's about empowering yourself. It's a skill that transcends projects and professions, empowering you to take control over your own destiny and become the architect of your own success. So whether you're striving for personal growth, chasing your dreams, or simply navigating life's twists and turns, remember this, version control isn't just for projects, it's for you. Embrace it, learn from it, and watch yourself evolve into the best version of yourself. So now let's start off by downloading Pitfalls. By looking up P4 download, we can visit the Pitfalls download page. In this page, we can now download the latest version of Pitfalls by scrolling down to the bottom and specifying our operating system, then the type of executable we want. Once it's downloaded, we can click on the executable to get the setup page. In here, we're going to make sure that all our checkboxes are checked. So now for the username, you can really specify anything you want. As for the server, we'll make sure that's blank and then we'll hit next. So now with everything set up, we can proceed with downloading, and in the event that we get any errors, I found that the best course of action is really to just get an earlier version of Pitfalls. In this case, I ended up with an error, so I'm going to download an earlier version of Pitfalls. So now back in the download page, we're going to scroll to the very top up until where it says earlier versions. Then we'll specify our operating system. And as for the version, I found that the most stable version that works for me up until this date will be February of 2023. So that's the version I'm going to specify. And now going through the same process, I'm going to make sure that all the checkboxes are checked and that I provide it with a username and make sure that the Pitfalls server is left blank. So now with the installation process complete, we can go to our Windows Explorer and search for P4V to start up our version control software. So now we have two options to pick from, a personal server and a remote server. You can think of the word server as a computer. So with a remote server, you essentially have a remote computer that many team members can collaborate on and make edits and changes to the files and even add files to that computer. As for the personal server, then it's considered your own personal computer, and the file systems within your computer will be reflected within this personal server. So to initialize this, we're going to go into initialize personal server. From here, we'll specify the username, which can be anything you want, and then we'll specify the location in which Pitfalls will search for these files. In this case, to make things easy, I'll just use my desktop as the location where Pitfalls can search through all the version controlled files. So from here we'll hit create, and then we'll notice that Pitfalls creates two files in one folder. For one of the files, the P4 ignore, it will essentially be the extensions of all the files that you don't want to include within your version control software. So now we have two tabs to pick from, a depot and a workspace. For the depot, it's essentially going to show all the files that are currently being version controlled, as we'll see later in this video. As for the workspace, since we specified our Helix server location to be our desktop, the workspace is essentially going to reflect all the files within our desktop. And to prove this, I'm going to create a new folder within our desktop, and we're going to see those changes reflected within our workspace. So with our new folder called book now created, we're going to hit the refresh button in Pitfalls, and we're going to find that that folder is indeed reflected within our workspace. Going back to this folder, we'll now create a text file, and we're going to be going through the process of creating different versions of that text file within our version control software. So the process is as follows. For the very first version of any file you want to version control, you're first going to have to add it, then submit it to the server. And you can do that by essentially hitting the add button, then hitting submit. As for every other version, aside from the first version, you'll be checking out that file, then submitting it to the server. And then you're essentially going to go through that loop over and over and over again. So the very first version, to reiterate, is going to be add, then submit. And then for every other version after that is going to be checkout, then submit. So now going through this process with our text document, I'm going to be creating the first chapter of our book, and then we're going to be adding that first version within our version control software. Now we're going to be adding a description for this version, which is something that we can actually refer back to in the future. Now that the description is set, we can go and submit this version to our version control software. To show the history of all the versions of our file alongside when they were submitted and their descriptions, we're going to be hitting this plus sign and then click on history. With this, we now see all the versions of our files alongside when they were submitted, as well as their file types. So now going through the process of creating the second version of our book, which will include chapter 2. And I also wanted to highlight that once we save this file, we're going to see a blue icon in Pitfalls, which suggests that the most recent version of this file isn't being version controlled. So now to submit the most recent version of this file, we're going to be hitting checkout, adding a description, then submitting that to the server. Now that we submitted the second version, we see that reflected within our history tab. So within our history tab, if I click on the first version, it will show the first version of that file. And then if I click on the second version, then it will show the second version of that file. So let's say I didn't like the changes that I made to the second version. I could always roll back to the previous versions by right-clicking on that version and then hitting get this revision. So once we click on the file within our book folder, we're going to find that in fact it is the first version of that file. So let's say I change my mind and I find that in fact I did like the changes I made to the second version of this file. I could always click on that file, and then at the very top where it says get latest, it will get me the latest version of that file. So now closing this file and opening it again, we're going to find that the version it's showing will be in fact the second version. Another way we can roll back to different versions of that file is by right-clicking on that file and then hit get revision and then specifying the revision that we want to roll back to. Here's an example of me getting different versions of this file. And then once I'm satisfied with the version that I picked, I can go back to my desktop and then click on that file, and it will in fact reflect the version that I had selected. And I can always revert back to the latest version by hitting get latest. One thing you can do to clean up the history tab is to right click on the silver heading and then unselect the items that you don't care about. So in my case, I don't care who the version was submitted by, nor the change list, so I'm going to unselect those. Another option available to you is if you don't like the history tab, you can see different versions of your file within the revision graph, and it will essentially show the exact same information, just displayed in a different way. This option will be helpful for when you have a very long description for a version of your file, and you simply can't just see it in the history tab. So we can click on the icons on the top right, and it will essentially show the different versions of your file alongside their descriptions. As discussed earlier in this video, the workspace is going to reflect all the files within our desktop. As for the depot, it's going to reflect only the files that are being version controlled. So if I click on the depot, you'll find that the only files that are shown right now are the ones that I'm currently version controlling. So as the project gets more and more complicated, there will definitely be a need to change the file structure. And when that happens, how are we supposed to deal with a version controlled file? In this case, I'm going to be creating a scripts folder, which I want to move my version controlled file within that folder. So it might be tempting to just move that file within the File Explorer, but I urge you not to do this, as doing this will actually destroy all the revisions of that file. Instead, a general rule of thumb that you should always follow with version control software is to always make sure that you do any changes, whether it's add, delete, or moving, within the version control software that you're using. So in my case, I'm going to want to move my file within Perforce rather than move it within the File Explorer to make sure that all the revisions are still being preserved. So to move this file, I'm just going to right click on it and then go to move/rename. And then from there, I'm just going to specify the destination that I want to move this file in. Then I can submit that change to the server. As we see in this change list, the file is being removed from the books folder and being added to the scripts folder. Now that we have taken the proper steps, we actually have the revisions from the old folder as well as the new one. In a similar fashion, if I want to change the name of the folder that has a version controlled file, I can't just rename it within the File Explorer. I have to make sure I go through this within the software that I'm using. So in this case, I'm going to have to right click on that folder and then go to move/rename, and then from there I can rename the folder. And now just to clarify a small point, just because I rename the folder, it doesn't mean it's going to automatically be reflected in the depot, which means that in order for that change to be reflected within the depot, I have to first submit that to the server. If you like this video, please leave a like and comment on what I should do next.